Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Chatting with the Lightkeeper. I hope everybody out there has had an amazing week, and the new week for you is off to a fabulous start. Perhaps where you're listening, it might not be a new week. It could be listening on the weekend. It's one of those unique things with a podcast. Sometimes I always kind of wonder, how do you start this? Because, I could say good morning, but where you're listening, it might not be morning, and you might be listening at 3 in the morning because you can't sleep. All those wonderful things in the mind of my overthinking head. Um, all those things play together. So wherever you're listening, whatever day it is, and really whatever season, because in the southern hemisphere you could be preparing for winter as spring is starting to kind of find its way here. It's a beautiful afternoon. In fact, neighbor just walked by walking their dogs. So it is sunny and fantastic here, and I am spending it sitting inside chatting with all of you people. I'm not complaining about that because I think if I did talk about you know what we talk about on the podcast, some of my neighbors might kind of complain. So better to sit at the table and get it in this way with the view of outside just right through the window, and no one has any idea what we're chatting about. And speaking of what we're going to chat about today, we're going to talk a bit about power exchange, which for me is kind of the yummy good stuff of the whole BDSM world. But it doesn't have to be for you. You can enjoy the lifestyle however you like it, and you don't have to be dominant. You don't have to be submissive. You can just enjoy various other aspects of it. So this isn't like it's a mandatory thing. It's a lot of people enjoy it, and there are other people, and I would hasten to say a lot of those people, that's not their jam. Just a friendly reminder, it's something I've said before, but throw it out there. If power exchange isn't your jam, but like you enjoy, say, being submissive, but only during playtime, only, for example, in the bedroom, then perhaps taking the role of bottom would be a better choice rather than saying you're submissive. And of course, the opposite's true. If you enjoy being in control in the bedroom, but outside of it, the rest of the lifestyle is meh. As far as the power exchange part, well, then that's great. Take the role of top rather than dominant. It's a great differentiator when it comes to power exchange. And really, what power exchange is, it is really the voluntary and consensual transfer of power, really, an authority from one partner, which is the submissive. The submissive is, I don't like to say giving up, but in essence, that's what we're doing. The submissive is giving up authority or giving up power in their life and handing it over to their dominant and giving their dominant the authority in those negotiated consensual areas to make decisions, make choices, and in those areas, the submissive is consenting to readily follow those decisions that a dominant makes. And it really takes a lot of courage for a submissive to do that, a lot of trust. It is in a way, it can be very intense, even though it's, can be little things from what to wear one day, or, it can be, little things or big things, but there's a lot of trust that goes into it and a whole lot of dedication as well on both sides. I mean, the dominant has to be willing, able, and wanting to um, be the leader and make those choices day in and day out. There can't be, days off or, oh, criminy, I had a bad day at work. And as the dominant, I decide what the, meal plan is going to be for the evening. Well, I don't feel like it. Well, you signed up to be, dominant, so you need to do it. And that's always the hardest part with power exchange, is those days when, gosh darn it, we don't want to do it. And it doesn't matter your role. It's a very human place to be. We all have those days where we just just don't want to do whatever it is. Maybe we don't want to be told to do anything, or maybe we just don't want to make another decision. We've made so many in our day at work that we're decisioned out. But the beauty of DS is that those are the times when you've made a commitment and you need to follow through and honor that commitment. Now, if you're in one of those spots, my advice is definitely tell your partner or partners where you are in your headspace. It will help them help you through it. Don't be shy. Don't try to smile through it or fake it because you're not feeling it. Just be honest and upfront about that. So, anyways, I got a little rambly, which means I'm away from my notes, my lovely notes that I have lined up. So, um, not actually sure where we left off with all of that. But the key thing with power exchange is that everything happens with negotiation. It's all a negotiation. Um, and it's everything is agreed upon, consensually agreed upon. There is no, well, if I'm the dominant, I say this has to happen. And the submissive has the right to say, no, it doesn't. Um, and so it's very important to understand that when we talk about power exchange and a dominant making decisions or choices on behalf of their submissive, it's all consensual. And just like anything with consent, it's fully revocable. So at any point in time, the dominant can say peace out, and the submissive can say the same thing, like peace out, we're done, or we're done. You're done making that choice for me. So it's consensual. It's always done willingly, um, and this is where we get into fun words like obeying, and there is part of that. Submissive will have times where they do have to do things perhaps differently than what they want to, or do something they don't want to, because of the choices their dominant has made for them. And it's very important that the dominant is always making those choices based on what's best for the submissive and what's best for the relationship, not necessarily what would make the dominant's life easier. Although sometimes part of that, if you have a submissive who is very service orientated, having them do something that helps make your life easier is something that they are going to be willing to do, wanting to do, and take great pride in doing. So, all depending on how your relationship works, that can be a part of it, or it might not be a part of it. And we also tend to think of power exchange, when it comes to the goodies, when it comes to the sexual aspects of the relationship. And for me, and this is just speaking for me, uh, everybody out there is welcome to do it differently. But for me, when it comes to the physical aspects, whether it's play, BDSM play or sex or a combination thereof, those are just sort of the icing on the cake. Play is a great time to have all the physical releases that it brings, but it is also, while it's fun, it's enjoyable, it's erotic, um, it is all of that, and the cherry on top is it is reinforcing the power exchange dynamic that is there. So you have all of this happening, and there's three key components that need to be there, um, really, to have a successful power exchange relationship that is going to last. Obviously, you have to trust your partner or partners. You have to build trust. So you have to be trust. You have to have complete trust in them, regardless of your role. And then there must be excellent communication. And that excellent communication has to also be coupled with, there's a concept out there, and I apologize, I cannot think of the person who invented it, or I guess more not invented, but titled radical honesty. You need to be absolutely honest with your with your partner or partners when it comes to power exchange to make it work. You have to be able to tell um, the whole truth, not just sort of the sugar-coated truth. We always, almost everybody says they're truthful, but we do sugarcoat things, We tell the truth, but maybe not the full extent of the truth. And when you're doing a power exchange relationship, you need to be able to communicate the full truth. And being radically honest means sharing the full truth. Sometimes, even if that is not what the other person or other people want to hear, you have to be able to do that. It doesn't mean that you have to be rude, or it doesn't mean that you have to be crass. If your partner has upset you, you need to communicate that and communicate it, exactly why. But for example, calling them a stupid asshole might not be beneficial in the whole process of communicating what has upset you, even if in the moment you do feel that they are. Um, so it's the ability to be able to communicate, be radically honest. And the other thing is, and this might sound trivial, but you really have to respect the hell out of your partner. It's really that simple. And respect seems easy, but to really respect someone, and you see this all the time, and why the Oscars were last night, and you see the actors be like, "Oh, I'm so lucky to have worked with this person," or "I'm so lucky to have been in this film," or and you kind of see that Hollywood luck kind of carry over into relationships. I'm lucky to have them. Oh, I'm so lucky to have them in my life. Well, yes, we all can feel incredibly lucky to have that amazing person or people in our lives. But it's so much more than that because if we just think we're lucky, how long before our luck runs out and, we're at the craps table and we crap out? Um, so it's great to feel special or feel amazing because you're, the people that you've chosen to be with are amazing, but we also have to understand that we need to respect them and the relationship. It's not just luck that they're there. We didn't just, somehow, pull the lever on a slot machine and hit the jackpot. We may feel we've hit the jackpot and um, feel amazing, but we have to respect the relationship and realize that there's much more there than just luck. And the other bit that kind of goes along with respecting the relationship is recognizing that the relationship is going to change. The relationship as it is this moment, if you're in a relationship, your relationship at this moment will be different than the relationship when I stop talking at the end of this podcast, however long that is. But we are always in a constant state of evolution. And so our relationship. So we have to respect the evolution and respect our partners. So those are kind of the key things to make a power exchange relationship last. There are you see it all the time online. Um, it seems sometimes almost like people are in and out of relationships. It's kind of like they're popping in, popping out, popping in, popping out. Um, and typically it's because, there isn't the trust that needs to be there. Trust issues are monumental to work through. If trust is breached or trust hasn't reached a certain point that it, perhaps it should have. And communication skills, um, we just what open your social media and look at how some people communicate when they're upset. Even in the vanilla world, how they choose to communicate. That radical honesty is it's not there. And you also see people, regardless of kink or vanilla, not respecting the relationship or their partners. It happens all the time. So since the lifestyle is more dynamic and it takes more to make it work, it's so important to work on those three key points. So that's kind of the little bit of the background on how we're exchange relationships. Let's talk more kind of in detail because there's really there are other subsets that we can get into. Whether it's like caregiver and little, which kind of in the old school would be like daddy or mommy dominance and littles. And there's all sorts of like little subsets. But when we look at it, there's basically two different genres. And under that you have the dominant submissive, and then you have the master slave. And while I voiced my concerns with the whole master slave terminology because I'm a history geek or nerd, however you want to put that tag on me, I will willingly accept it either way. But let's just kind of focus on the dominant submissive and the master slave and what makes them different. Because it can seem sometimes kind of confusing. And sometimes it is because in the lifestyle, somebody might identify as a slave, and when you ask them what it means to them to be that, they might give you the answer, which for you means that person's a submissive, or the difference between somebody who's a dominant versus a master. Um, yeah, so it's very important to ask, what does that mean to you? One quick word of warning online. Typically, you see this with gentlemen, not always the case, but master in the connotation of the lifestyle, and this is the old canons, the old way, which doesn't necessarily make it right. But in the olden days, you were a master because your community gave you that title because, say, for example, you were a master of rope bondage and you taught classes in it. So your community, gave you the title of master. Or you're in a relationship with a amazing partner who calls you master. That's kind of in the past. That's how master came to be, or how you came to get that title in the lifestyle. And nowadays we have a phenomenon which is instant mastery, and it's not just on the dominant side. You have submissives who instantly come to the lifestyle and believe they know everything there is to know about submission. So it goes both ways. But in the lifestyle, there are typically gentlemen who take the title of master, and they've kind of done the instant mastery thing. They've floated around a couple of lifestyle sites for 6 hours, and they're a master. And so master can be an amazing term of respect and reverence from a community or a partner, or it can be a sham in a way. So just be careful with that, especially in the online world. So, what are some of the things that separate a submissive from a slave? Um, Both, of course, are going to take their roles and positions consensually. Uh, there is no coercion or forcing going on. They're both choosing this voluntarily. Typically, the submissive will retain much more autonomy and negotiation power in the relationship, where a slave will have less autonomy compared to a submissive. And in fact, some people would use the term that the slave has fewer rights. And I don't know, rights sounds kind of extremish to me personally, but I believe that less autonomy is definitely the case because a slave is going to desire their master to be much more authoritative and to make many more choices on their behalf and set many more expectations than a submissive would. Um, with submissives and the level of control versus a slave with level of control, the submissive typically uh, has many more boundaries and limits than a slave. Um, and why slaves can ask, you know, why, ask that big question, why? Why do you want me to do this? Um, Typically, they are going to want to just simply do it rather than worry about the reasoning why they're being asked to do something. Where a submissive will often need or want to hear the why behind why they're dominant, um, is is requesting that they do something or act in a certain way, all those fun things. Um, but both of them um, can withdraw from their agreement at any point in time with their dominant or with their master. However, with a dominant submissive relationship, there's often more negotiation that happens as the partnership evolves. Where on the MS side, when things evolve, typically the submissive, or in this case the slave, is typically giving up more control as the relationship evolves and deepens and strengthens. And there is not necessarily as much negotiation that goes into it. Once again, because the slave wants to do their what their master wants them to do. So it is more, I don't know, it's more of kind of cliche, the cliche of DS, on the MS side, when it comes to um, the obedience, I guess, of it would be the way to put it. Um, Within DS, a submissive is going to basically be on equal footing with their dominant when stepping outside of the agreed upon areas where they have given control to their dominant. It's outside of those areas. It is There's an equality. The dominant doesn't, say, "Hey, this is what it's going to be." Um, there's the guess you would say very much the vanilla type of relationship where if it's outside of the area where we've consensually given power to the dominant, it's a traditional, that sounds horrible, doesn't it? A traditional vanilla discussion. But it is very much like that outside of the areas where control has been consensually ceded. We're in an MS dynamic. There are many dynamics where they go to what is called TPE, and what that stands for is total power exchange. And when that happens, and it's something that gets built to, it's not something that a dominant, or in this case, the master, snaps his fingers and says, "Okay, it's time for TPE." It's a process, and it's a building process that relationships on the MS side go to get there. It's not an overnight thing, but that's kind of where they want to evolve and get to. Many of them, not all, but many of them want to get there. And it's really, when it's a TPE type situation, life in the relationship revolves around the dynamic. Obviously, it can't necessarily take place all the time, everywhere, because of the vanilla world that surrounds us. But it's much more in force. Um, from it's a very. It took me a long time to try and grasp this because this is not something that was ever like a fantasy or a desire of mine to have. So it was very hard for me, especially when I was younger. Even a few years ago, I still struggled to grasp how how this could be healthy. When you putting sort of all your eggs in one basket, and following one person's lead, consensually, obviously, but you're following their lead, regardless. And as I've matured, looked at it, made myself stand back and look at it from 10,000 feet. For those people that find the MS dynamic to be their jam, it must be very, very liberating, for the slave. Uh, you're freeing the master is basically freeing, the submissive's mind, and giving them freedom, by making choices for them, even in areas which, for me, would not be things that I would want to have, um, be that way in my relationship. But for them, it's a freedom. It's a freedom, for both sides of the MS side of it. So it was, it took me a while to get there, but I've finally have gotten there and gotten to the point where I think I can understand it the best I can because it's not my jam. But to understand it and because I can better understand it, um, I went from a place where it was very hard for me to accept to accepting how that works for those who it works for. So there's all of that, which kind of differentiates between submissive and slave, and really it is what it comes down to is how much control is the dominant going to have in the relationship? And don't think that relationships can't evolve. Um, seen countless times where a relationship starts out as dominant and submissive, and then they're together for, we'll call it, 10 years, and that relationship has morphed into more of an MS relationship because they've been together so long and it just flows, and how it flowed into that MS relationship for them. Or they start out kind of coming together and looking for that MS partnership, but then it changes into more of a DS partnership as the relationship has evolved. And remember, evolution and respecting your partner or partners is a huge component to making a lasting lifestyle relationship. And in fact, one of the best things to kind of watch from the sidelines, if you will. Lifestyle friends of mine, boy, um, I met them very early on in my journey, and it was a male female couple, and he was dominant. No, excuse me, she was dominant. He was submissive. Now they are still together. They are happily married. Have raised the kids. Kids are gone. And their life is grand. It's kind of a kinky fairy tale relationship that they've led. But it started with her as the dominant, him as the submissive. Nowadays, it is completely flipped. He is her master, and she is happily his slave. So relationships can morph and they can evolve and they can change. So if you start into a partnership and you start out, as DS, who knows where, it's going to lead you to, or how it's going to go. Roles can change, dynamics can change. It's all just amazing. So it's very important to respect the evolution that's going to happen, in your partnership, and don't go into it with, the pre-existing thought of it's never going to go here, or I'm never going to go there. Or for me as a dominant to go into a relationship and say I'll never be a submissive. Well, if, like, I don't know, who knows what the future holds, right? I can say I don't think I would ever be a submissive. That's how I feel today. I don't think I ever would. But when I look and see my friends and how their relationship completely flip-flopped over the years and how happy they are, you see that really anything is possible. We can say, oh, that would never work. I would never go for that. But, when you find that connection and things grow, blossom, and evolve, who knows where it'll take you. So, don't let your preconceived notions, for example, keep you from trying something new with a partner or approaching things new because we are going to evolve and our relationships are going to evolve, even if it's going to evolve in ways we don't ever see it going. So there's all of that. Um, and like I said, the submissive for me, it takes great courage and great trust to be able to say, you, Mr. Dominant, are going to get to make these choices on my behalf, and I am going to surrender to those choices. I am going to trust that you are going to do what is in my best interest when it comes to that. And that decision is very empowering for a submissive. And it also is empowering for the dominant partner because, speaking once again, just for me as a dominant, when I have the honor of being able to do that and to lead and to guide and to make choices, it empowers me as well. And for a dominant, with all of this, they must be they must be responsible. Um, they must have some level of self-control because you have to be responsible. And there's a difference between being in control and being controlling. It's very important, submissives, that you kind of do your homework there to understand what someone who is in control might look like for you versus somebody who is controlling, and also dominance, regardless of where they fall on the spectrum, whether they're a dominant or aspire to be a master. There should be a nurturing component there because you are leading the relationship. And since relationships evolve, as we all know, you're going to want to nurture your relationship so it can succeed. And the other thing that's wonderful about DS relationships is that play. And so much, especially online, focuses on play, all sorts of exciting sensual gifts out there and pictures about the play. But really, when it's time for play and you're into the whole power exchange thing, that is just not only does it feel great and is amazing, but the whole process is reinforcing your roles. It's building trust, it's reinforcing the roles. Uh, we're communicating because we're negotiating. All of that comes into with play on top of the feel good yummies, is that we're reinforcing psychologically the roles of dominant and submissive. And as I said before, it's so important to be able to communicate and communicate effectively to build trust, build intimacy through open discussions and through that radical honesty, and make sure that whenever there's a blip, an issue, a misconception comes up, or a stereotype, whatever it is, that you talk to your partner or partners about it rather than just kind of being dismissive and kind of hoping that we can sweep it under the rug and that little issue won't come back because it always seems to do that. Um, Also, whenever we have any type of power exchange relationship, whether it's dominant submissive or master and slave, we still have negotiated limits. We still have safe words. Um, it doesn't go away. For example, if somebody is in an MS relationship, there are still soft limits that need to be negotiated to be approached. There are still hard limits, which you are never to cross. And we still have our safe words and gestures and the ability to revoke consent at any point and at any time. That never changes, regardless of the kind of power exchange relationship that you might find a fit for you. Um, Another thing that is commonly asked is, how are conflicts handled in DS? Because we're human, we're going to have differences between partners. It never fails. And it may seem to be something where the dominant partner would prevail when it comes to, say, a disagreement. Um, that's like an oversimplified misconception that, I am Dom, therefore it's my choice, you'll do it. Now, there might be some areas where that comes into play. For example, if it's an area of the relationship where the submissive has negotiated and consensually given the authority to the dominant to make choices in that area, it is an area then where a dominant may say, yes, we've talked about this. This is my decision. Here it is. But that is not how most disagreements, most types of challenging situations with conflicts come to a lifestyle relationship. Uh, you still have to do things like if you're in a relationship and you're living together, agree on perhaps buying a house or picking a new rental, or it comes time to, do we repair the car? Do we buy a new car? All those types of decisions happen the same way they sort of happen in the vanilla world through communication. You communicate, you negotiate, all those things that you do to make a decision that benefits the entire relationship. Gee, a tree collapsed in the windstorm and fell through the roof. Um, I guess maybe perhaps it would be nice if you were, had the trust where you could just be like, okay, you know, take care of that however you want to your partner. Uh, be a load off of shoulders to be able to just say to your partner, okay, you take care of the tree and the roof, whatever you want. And sometimes that does happen and it works for some relationships. Other relationships, a tree through the roof is a lot of mutual conversations and a lot of decisions about contractors and whatnot to get it done. But whenever it comes to any sort of challenging relationship and conflict resolution, it's very important, I believe, for dominants and submissives to obviously respect the partnership, but also respect their roles. Be respectful to each other. Even if you're a dominant, you might rule the roost in certain areas, but you need to respect you're submissive, and as a submissive, you need to be respectful with your dominant. And in a way, it's no different than a respectful vanilla couple or partnership handling tough decisions by being respectful. Oftentimes, those partnerships where then something goes bump, like trying to decide whether to fix or replace the family automobile, might end up in a whole lot of yelling and screaming, name calling, and various other things like that. It doesn't matter whether you're kink or vanilla, there are people that resolve conflict that way, and it really doesn't perhaps resolve things long term. Yes, you may make a decision through screaming and calling people names on the situation at hand, but overall, it's not respecting your partner or partners, and you're eroding the relationship in the process. So it's important. The long story, got long-winded, sorry, is be respectful. Um, Even during um, a charged discussion you are having with your dominant or submissive, if you're a dominant, um, be respectful of your submissive. Perhaps use a pet name that you might have during a discussion, not demeaning me or anything like that, but just to acknowledge the lifestyle component as you're having a conversation. And if you're submissive, you know, using that honorific that you choose to use for your dominant partner during a discussion to remind them and to remind you that you are still respectful of the power exchange that's happened. And of course, you're being respectful of your partner in your relationship, and you will work through it. So it's very important to deal with all of that. A final few things to talk about too, especially if you are newer to power exchange, because there's going to be some things that you may feel that you're not expecting. And there's three emotions that come oftentimes people will feel, whether they're on the dominant side or the submissive side. It might seem surprising to hear that they come also with the dominant side. But these three emotions are guilt, shame, and fear. Guilt can come about um, many ways. Feeling guilty for liking the lifestyle because society says we shouldn't. Um, Looking at it from a dominant perspective, guilt can come from, uh, your submissive has consensually said, you can make decisions in this area of my life, and we're all human. Newsflash, dominants are human, and we screw up, and we make a bad choice. So we may feel guilty that what we advised our submissive to do wasn't the right thing for that time. Um, so we might carry guilt from that, or we may even feel shameful. And once again, we could feel shame too from just simply exploring and trying to incorporate the lifestyle into our relationship, because once again, society says it is a taboo. Uh, and those can pop up, that whole guilt and shame from it can pop up at any time and we can think we've put it past us, and suddenly we feel guilty for liking, what we did during play last night because it wasn't what society says we should have done. So those are things there. And then fear. Fear comes along, and relationship fear for me, um, to be frank, is I always fear either moving too fast for a relationship. Is this progressing too fast? And oh my goodness, is it too slow? Is it plodding along too slowly? Like it'll never get to that goal because it's like Captain Slow's at the wheel. Um, and I fear that, and so it's a trying to get to that. I guess that's Goldilocks, where it's just right, the one in the middle. To try and get that just right. And I also fear failure. I don't like to fail. Doesn't mean I don't fail, and it doesn't mean I don't try new things or try things because I'm afraid to fail. As I've grown and leveled up in life, I have endeavored to take more risk, to fall down, knowing I'm going to make mistakes and I'm going to fall down. But the beautiful thing in life is you get back up and you keep on going and you learn your lessons from when you fall down. Um, so fear is there, especially if you are newer. It's the fear of the unknown. Fear of the unknown, for me, is not nearly as bad as fear of heights. Fear of heights, or like needles, fear of needles. Ugh. So the fearing of the unknown is something that you talk about, you deal with, and you talk with your partner about. Much, much more different than those other fears that we may have, where we fear an object or a height, or all of those things. And it's very important that when we feel these emotions, the guilt, shame, or potentially fear, and that we reach out and we discuss with our partner or partners what we're feeling and potentially why we're feeling it, and being vulnerable with them, because being vulnerable builds trust. And the more trust you build and being vulnerable, it also leads to being authentic with your partners. So it's a fabulous way to build that connection, even though the emotions that we are feeling are not wonderful, happy, shiny emotions that we want to feel all the time. So it's very important to recognize that those three little emotions will pop up in your journey through a power dynamic if you haven't experienced them before. And finally, I just want to end with just a few quick thoughts, a few, I guess, misconceptions that I feel compelled to address. First of all, Remember, gender or race or someone's sexuality has nothing to do with where they fall on the power exchange side. And what I mean by that is just because um, you're a man, it does not mean you're a dominant. And just because someone is a woman, it doesn't mean that they are submissive. Uh, or even, going and talking about a few of the people I've met who um, one of my favorite little dive bars um, in the big bad city of Detroit is a gay bar. I absolutely love this little bar. It's wonderful because you can go in and you're just accepted. It's one of the few places in life that I feel comfortable um, if I'm talking with somebody to not hide that I'm into BDSM. It's like, oh, that's cool. It's a very nice atmosphere. But it also kind of, some of my experiences there talking to people because I'm being open. Um, I can remember talking to a transgendered individual there, and they were frustrated that because they were transgender, that so many people assumed that then they were submissive, and how that drove them bonkers. And they identified as a switch, and the whole whether they were dominant or submissive with the person all depended on how they vibed with them. But that drove them bonkers, and it's so important that we um, not put labels on people uh, because of their gender, their race, or their sexuality. All those things that people unfortunately do in the vanilla world that are bad there are bad here in the lifestyle. So please keep that in mind that don't let the stereotypes or the misconceptions come into play as you get to know people for who they are, rather than what what they look like, who they're attracted to or not attracted to, because power dynamics and power exchange, all those things, it doesn't they don't matter. Which is one of the beautiful things about the lifestyle is how accepting and how diverse it really is. Yes, there are some um, unenlightened individuals that are here in a part of the lifestyle, just like out in the vanilla world, there are, I don't know, um, leftover cave people, perhaps. But it's a lot less in the lifestyle. It's much more accepting. But just remember to not, as we explore power dynamics, don't let the misconceptions come into how we how we view a person, especially when we're starting off getting to know them. So this is what I have on power dynamics. I hope you enjoyed this lovely little podcast and are looking forward to next week. I am actually looking forward to it because next week we're going to talk about building your BDSM community. And what I'm saying is your BDSM community. We're not talking about the whole bigger, wider thing that's labeled the BDSM community out there on social media or websites or in your in-person kink events, but looking at the BDSM community sort of like one of those Build-A-Bear workshops. And we're going to talk about how to build your own personal BDSM community. So wherever you're listening, don't forget to click the follow button so you never miss an episode that week. So that way, when next Tuesday rolls around and we're building our BDSM bears for our own personal communities, you'll be notified that that episode is ready for your listening pleasure. So as always, thank you so much for listening. I truly appreciate your investment of time and energy listening. I know listening doesn't necessarily take a lot of energy, but it does take time, and I truly appreciate it. So until next week, have fun, be safe, and I'll talk to you soon.